Okay. Well, in the beginning, we had an old burned out building on a pad that was badly cracked and spalled. So we had to get it removed and trucked away. So here they are, just breaking it up. It was not a very good pad. It broke up very easily. Then we dug some footings to a depth of 2 feet. And then I laid out strings on batter boards off of survey pins to establish the position of the footing, which we installed just with stakes and 2x6s to create a form. Did a lot of hammering with that hammer named Mike. And here we are with the outside of the footing laid out and leveled, staked in. Then we added a string set for the inside of the footing. The gaps in the bottom are just filled with dirt so that the cement didn't roll out. There I've got a sleeve hole dug for the sewer pipe to go underneath the footing. That's got the rebar laid into the footing. And there's some braces on the footings to prevent the footings from spreading from the weight of the concrete. And then we poured the concrete and the rebar verticals were added in while the concrete was still wet. And those will be the bearing point, or the rebar for the bearing wall, which we should see shortly. There's the form going up. So there would have been 3 runs of rebar in there. That's just the beginning. There's more of the forms going up. There's the forms braced and ready to go. It's just held together with snap ties and a whaler bar. And that box in the corner is just to direct the concrete coming out of the chute on the truck into the form. It just slides along the top. Actually worked very well. There we are, ready to pour. It's 30 feet by 40 feet. And there is the footing and bearing wall all poured with door bucks installed. And then we will be beginning to strip the forms. And there's the forms all stripped out. And they're insulated the bearing wall. That all but 4 inches of that gets completely buried in the ground eventually. And then there's 2 feet of styrofoam, 2 layers of 1.5 inches sideways over the top of the footing to prevent frost from coming in under the footing and heaving things. We're doing some backfilling, leveling. There we were framing the walls and laying them out just on the ground. And then roughed in some plumbing for the underground for floor drains in the bathroom and the sink. There's more rough ins, not quite complete, but you get the idea. There's a little bit more to put in. Then I got Dad to bring in the big tractor, and we stood the walls up in 16-foot sections. They're 16 foot tall and 16 foot wide, and then they were just nailed together once they were in place and bolted down to the top of the bearing wall. And my son came home from school and really enjoyed monkeying around on the framing. There's the south wall going up, pretty well up. The front wall we had to put up by hand, so we kind of just stood it up and then framed in the pieces in place. Then we took a break and checked out some cows. That'll be important later. There we are, framing in all the cripples above the headers. And my friend Scotty giving me a hand, hopefully measuring all the correct lengths for each of those cripples. But they all seem to fit fairly well, so he must have got it half right. There's the front wall constructed. And that we were just putting the cap plate on the top to tie the walls together. There we're building the roof on the ground just next to the building with some sleepers on the ground. We just marked out the positions of the trusses and strapped them and braced them together so we could load them with a crane, along with the help with this young fella from the local Hutterite colony. And there we are with some of the strapping on the walls done, ready for the roof to go on. And there's the roof. That was kind of a late night. We just got the picker in the evening and got the roof tied on with the last bit of light. There's the beginning of the excavation for the utilities coming in. There's the new tank for the septic system in place. There's most of the strapping done on the walls, and you can see the pipe in the roof that we'd strung through. That's what we attached the crane to, was to that 2 7/8 pipe. Then backfilling with the little Kubota tractor. It's a very useful little tractor. It took a while, but with the confined space that we had to work with, it worked very well. There's more backfilling. Some shitty weather came along. Then the only way to get that 42-foot chunk of pipe out of the rafters was to cut it into pieces and just let her fly. The ground was quite soft at that point. We'd had some rain. There's just a detail of the framing that I took for future reference. The front wall getting strapped and ready for tin. And there's more prep work inside. That's the hole for the precast sump for the floor drains. And my son helping out a little bit again. There's the floor prep going in. That was all shot in with a builder's level. You can see in the right corner, which is a transit. It's like a old school laser level. Worked very well. Everything was shot in within about a 1/16 of an inch. I checked it later when I got my hands on a laser level. So the floor was graded to match the slope of the floor. And there's more, just continuing the slab prep. There's my wife trying to not be in a picture. She ran away, but I followed her because I thought she should be part of this. And there's an extension for the precast sump. It was not tall enough for what I wanted it to be used, so the concrete floor just gets poured down lower to the top of the precast sump, and they join together that way. That's just a terrible waste of some very good Baltic birch plywood, but it made a nice form. And there we have the floor grates installed and the styrofoam on the floor with the heat lines laid out. There's no pipe in the corner because the cooler is going to be sitting there. There's no point in heating the floor under the cooler. Here's where somebody did not drill a hole, so I took a picture of it for later evidence. This has got most of the rebar in, a few pieces left to tie, and the same thing. Then we went up and put the ridge cap on the roof because whenever you pour concrete, it starts to rain, and if you have any holes, well, then it drips and ruins your nice finished floor. And this is just a couple of shots from the roof. And these are some hailstorms from a storm we had later on. Then the cement truck showed up, and the fellows come in and began pouring the floor and did a very fine job indeed. It's all sloped very nicely. All the water drains out properly. I was very impressed with these guys. If you need a concrete place and finish crew, let me know. I can recommend these guys. You can tell that they're not plumbers. They're in fact carpenters because they wear belts and their butt cracks ain't showing. So that's good. There's the finished floor. They did put some saw cuts in it to help prevent cracking, and I've had no issues to date. And a cow showed up and identified as a duck briefly, but we got past it. Put the tin on the front wall. And then we got the exterior finished and all the cladding complete. And moved to bring in some framing for the boiler room in the corner and prep for installation. Most of the electrical's been run at this point. And continued insulating. It was getting cold out, so we had to tarp the doors up nicely to keep some heat in. There's the rough-ins for the drain, waste, and vent, and the mezzanine floor beginning to be constructed. We're starting to sheet the ceiling. You can see those are 1/2-inch ready rod that are hanging down from a beam from up inside the rafters, and those will be used to support the mezzanine floor. which you'll see later on. Everything's insulated and polyed, and the sheeting's going up. The reason that the door doesn't look trimmed out properly is because we just sheeted right over them for the most part, and then just cut them out with a router with a flush trim bit, which is a lot easier than measuring and cutting. Here we are with some more sheeting. Ceiling's pretty much completed. The door is installed, which helped greatly to keep the place a lot warmer. Well, there was no attic insulation that was blown in later. There's some more work on the mezzanine. It should be coming. There it is. There's the mezzanine in place, framed. And another shot of that. There's the subfloor going on the mezzanine. They've put half-inch steel pipe over top of the ready rods with a flange on each end. Those will get lifted up and placed on the wall. There's the boiler installation, partially anyways, getting ready. There we've got some lights on. The electricians come in and did some finishing, got our doors operational and all that. I was so proud of this job that I did on this threshold, I decided to take a picture of it. There you can see the pipes are moved up and put on the wall for the mezzanine. And there's the workbench, which I got from a local retailer because they were getting a new front counter, and I took off with the old bits. Works quite nicely for a free bench. There's the cooler being constructed. It's like a Lego block type of thing. The panels all locked together. Works very nicely. It's set up on a styrofoam pad to create a thermal break between the floor and the cooler. The stairs came in, and I didn't want to wait for any help, so I muscled them in there by balancing it and screwing around, and got it up on some ladders and got it installed. Put a railing on it so the inspector would leave me alone. I actually had to take this picture and send it to the building inspector because he didn't believe that I was going to put a railing on it. There's the bathroom door, which finally got done. We got the flooring finished with just some old hardwood flooring left over from when I built the house. There's my son peeling the plastic film off the sink, which was quite enjoyable for him. He had a great deal of fun with that. There's my 3-compartment sink. There's a picture that's out of sequence because that's the bathroom without the door. There's the faucet for the sink with the pre-rinse sprayer on it, which is very nice to have. There's an old wrench that I found outside, which after I put in vinegar for 3 days, cleaned up beautifully and works just fine now. There's the wall behind the sink. That's the sink's nearly installed there. Put FRP panels on just for ease of cleaning, and it brightens things up quite nicely. And I put a little drying shelf over top. That's an old rack out of a shelving system that just worked very nicely for that. That is my initial design for my rail hanger, not to scale. There's the actual hanger that will be installed to hold the rail going in and out of this cooler. That's just the cooler with the units on top, the cooling units. They're bending all the rail hangers in a hydraulic press and welding a tab on the bottom to support the rail. And there's the rail installed. It goes right through and into the cooler. Works quite well. I'm pretty impressed with that. As you can see, my son was able to roll around on it and have quite a bit of fun. Then he got all worried about the coronavirus, but it was good because we didn't have to discuss gluten-free products or the fact that Gwyneth Paltrow ruined canned fish for everyone and candles all at the same time. Then we took a little trip, went to Halkirk to the old skating rink there. They have a gigantic model train set up, which I really recommend going to see. It's actually free. They accept donations, but the kids really enjoy it. All the trains move and drive around. There's tons of them in there. It's actually pretty interesting. And here is the end result of the system. I'm quite pleased with it. It works very well. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments, and I'll try to answer anything that I can.